Great. And the next session will be chaired and moderated and introduced by our colleague Maria Iku from ILSP in Athens. Maria, the floor is yours. This is a remote control. I will get it working. Just a second. You can start.
Thanks. Καλημέρα σας. Χαιρόμαστε πολύ που είστε εδώ. This is a session about language diversity and language equality. So my colleague Teresa and friend aired the idea that we should in this room, at least in this session, hear a bit of smaller European languages and step down on the dominance of English. So Teresa Lin from Dublin City University, Freda Steers from the Institute for the Dutch Language, Gareth Watkins from Bangor University, Svetla Koeva from the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences, and Eirikur Rognarson, sorry, Eirikur, from the Institute for Icelandic Studies. They are the authors of some of the language reports that we produced in the frame of the European Language Equality Program, and they will help me today to present to you our main findings with regard to the level of digital readiness of our languages. So I'll start with this graph, which has already been presented today by Stelios Piperidis. As Stelios explained, we wanted this investigation of the state of the art of the level of technology support for languages to be evidence-based, in contrast to the expert-based exercise conducted 10 years ago in Berlin. And for this to happen, yes, we needed the full collection of language resources hosted on the catalog of the ELG platform. We needed to harvest other well-established repositories, but we also needed the help of the ELE consortium, which, as you have seen earlier today, comprises 52 partners. Most of them are research institutions, experts in their own languages. And one of the main goals of this exercise was that we update the 2012 MetaNet white papers with language reports that provide the state of the art for our languages today. And this is the last block of this graph. 35 language reports have been produced within ELE by approximately 100 different authors, and we have covered 43 languages, more than what we have promised in our proposal, more than our contractual obligations, because we were happy to have partners and collaborating partners that in a pro bono basis offered to produce reports for their own languages without being compensated, financially compensated for this. These reports are all available on the ELE website. You can download and study them on this URL. So, in an attempt today to summarize some of the main findings that are relevant across almost all of the reports, we have used the ELG language resources collection to conduct a comparison across languages. This comparison is, as I said, evidence-based. That means that it is mainly numerical. It is based on the numbers of data and technologies that are hosted on the European language grid. The tools and services, of course, are an indication, and a direct indication of the level of technological support for a language, whereas the data, corpora, lexical resources, models, and all these data resources could be used as an approximation of the short and medium-term potential for technological development. We have used the same grouping of languages as in the MetaNet white papers, that is excellent support, good support, moderate, fragmentary, and weak or no support at all. There's no color in this table for the excellent support band because simply we think that no language in Europe is excellently supported, ideally supported yet. The green color indicates areas and languages that are in the good support level. The light green one, the moderate support level. The yellow cells indicate languages and areas that are fragmentarily supported. And the lighter it goes, it means that there's minimal or no support at all. We compared the languages across various application areas when it comes to tools and technologies: text processing, speech processing, image and video processing, information extraction and information retrieval, human-computer generation, and translation technologies. And we also clustered data resources as per some basic resource types: text corpora, multimodal corpora, parallel corpora, models, and lexical resources. So what are the most evident findings in this table? If we examine it vertically, you can see that the Grenier vertical line is clustered under the translation technologies group, meaning that many of the languages we investigated are at least moderately supported by machine translation today. Many yellowish cells are under multimodal corpora and language models. These two seem to be significant gaps across many of the languages when it comes to language resources. Now, on the horizontal axis, as you can see, the first group is that of the EU official languages, and Federico previously already indicated that more or less our official languages in the European Union are better supported than all the rest spoken in our continent. This group of languages, this part of the table, is greenier than the rest. And among these, you already know that English is dominant, followed by French, German, and Spanish. But the least supported, the more yellow lines, are those that correspond to Irish and Maltese. Moving down the table to the rest of the languages, these are two groups of languages that enjoy some type of official status in their countries, in the countries they're spoken in, either at the national or regional level. The ones that are outstanding are Icelandic, Norwegian, Serbian, Basque, Catalan, Galician, and Welsh. All the rest of the languages, and I'm specifically referring to the very last row of this table, which reads all other languages. These are very small regional or minoritized languages in Europe, are actually non-existent in the ELG catalog or are very minimally supported in our collection. Now, this is an alternative visualization of the same findings. The numbers on the y-axis represent the percentage of ELG resources where a language is represented in, whether it is an input or an output language when we talk about technologies, or a content language when we describe data. The distance between the best supported language, which is English, of course, and the three good, well-supported languages in Europe, Spanish, German, and French, is evident. Here again, we can evidence the long tail we have already seen today in Federico's presentation. Now, Stelios also reminded us of the 2012 expert-based exercise and that table when 10 years ago the languages investigated then were clustered into these 5 same groups. Can we compare these two visualizations, these two graphs? Well, not directly, because The approach is different now, 10 years later, but still what is more than evident is the distance that the small European languages need to cover in order to keep pace with a few big languages in Europe. These are the languages, especially English, that drive the state of the art, and all the rest strive to keep pace. So what do the authors of the language reports produced in the ELE project believe that is needed in terms of resources and technologies so that these smaller European languages try to keep up with the progress achieved in our field as a whole, and especially achieved for the English language? The answers, of course, are different per language, but there are a few types of technologies and resources that are very, very frequently mentioned across almost all of the reports. When it comes to data, these are multimodal resources and language models. There have been many mentions to domain-specific data, to data that reflect language use in the social media, speech data, and semantic resources. And with respect to technologies, in many, many reports, the need for conversational and question-answering system has been underlined. For natural language generation, including especially summarization, discourse processing systems, and natural language understanding. There are a number of additional issues that are shared across many, if not all, reports. And we have tried to summarize them in the form of a SWOT analysis. So what was impressive when reading these 35 reports is that across almost all of them, there was a considerable optimism. There was a very positive tone of what we have achieved during these last 10 years. And this is no surprise because, as you know, there has been a paradigm shift during these last years, and we have been able to considerably progress the state of the art in many application areas of LT. Especially when, in cases when there has been significant national support in the countries where a spoken is has been evidenced, then the authors of the report were very, very enthusiastic of the achievements during the last decade. And this has been especially the case in Spain, Denmark, Iceland, and Estonia, with very well-coordinated and large-scale national programs. And certainly these countries are worth to be considered a best practice example. What has also been frequently underlined is the positive impact of participating to language resources infrastructures, initiatives, and projects such as the Clarin network and the Clarin repositories, ELG, of course, the ELRC share initiatives, and things like that. On the positive side, again, but this time on the technological aspect, the authors have underlined that transfer learning methodologies are an opportunity for the small languages to develop technologies and applications without huge investments. But in many cases, it has been underlined that such technologies do have limitations, and that investment in culture-specific and language-specific research and innovation is still needed. Now, on the opposite side, weaknesses, gaps, needs. We are all well aware of that. Still, the LT community feels uncertain about the legal status of resources and technologies providers of data and technologies don't know how to license their resources. They don't know if they have the right to use, reuse existing resources. When it comes to funding streams, it has been argued that, with few exceptions, funding during the last decade has been mostly fragmented in the form of one-off grants. Things are accomplished, things are developed, and then put on the shelf and forgotten, and these accomplishments need to be sustained and enhanced. In certain cases, there have been mentions that regional and non-standard varieties or dialects have not been adequately supported by the LT community. Cases like Austrian German or Cypriot Greek that are considerably different from their standard variety need to be more carefully, more intensively supported. And finally, well, not finally, almost finally, although there has been some change in mentalities, it is still recognized that the value of data is insufficient, and that there are huge amounts of public data that can be used but still remains unexploited. And this is the actual final point. It was impressive, at least for me, to realize that, especially for bilingual communities, there's an imminent threat, the threat of language shift to the dominant language, simply because content, digital content and technologies are not available, so the speakers, the bilingual speakers, tend to shift to the bigger language, which is very well supported, and tools and content, digital content, are available for them. An example was provided yesterday by Sabine, who talked about the children in Greenland, who, simply because they can't find digital content, they shift to Danish or English, or I don't. This is even the case, I mean, for my 10-year-old Greek-speaking son, who keeps browsing digital content on YouTube in English, simply because Greek content is not as rich as the English one, or as exciting. So, with this short, I hope, introduction, I would like to give the floor first to Teresa Lynn from Dublin City University to present her main findings on the Irish.
Agus tá áthas an domhan orm a bheith anseo libh inniu chun an tuirc seo a phlé. I'm going to talk briefly about the Irish language. I have 5 minutes to summarise a very comprehensive document. I'm not going to go through it in detail. I would recommend, if you're interested in learning more about Irish and its digital readiness, to download the report from the ELE website. If you don't have time to read the whole document, please read the abstract introduction and conclusions. So we're going to focus on the strengths and highlights, first of all. As Marie discussed, we had a report in 2012, so that was a MetaNet white paper series. And in that report, machine translation for Irish was in the category of weak or no support. So we are actually excited to say we are now in the fragmentary support category. It's not exactly something to write home about, but for us it's a huge achievement in the last 10 years. This is down to a number of factors which I'd like to highlight, mainly our involvement in the European Language Resource Coordination. So our membership of the LRC has made a huge impact in the data collection for Irish language parallel data. This is where we've gone out to public administration across Ireland and anywhere else that has publicly funded translations in order to feed our machine translation research at Dublin City University and pass it on to the European Commission for the e-translation system. We've also been involved with 2 Connecting Europe facility projects, so the ELRI project and Principal project, which both focused on data collection for Irish. The Open Data Directive has really helped us in collecting data and convincing our data holders and stakeholders that it is safe and okay to share their data as long as there's no sensitive data in there. It's been paid for the taxpayers, and essentially it should be used to provide technology for them. Science Foundation Ireland, who run the ADAPT Centre where I work, we have funded 2 PhD students in machine translation for Irish. These are the first 2 PhD students ever to work on Irish. In 10 years, 2 PhD students, again, is nothing to write home about, but 2 is better than no PhD students. Irish is now working language of the EU since this year, which means that e-translation and the need for e-translation is more important than ever. In the area of speech technologies, compared to 10 years ago, we now have steps towards automatic speech recognition. We don't have a production-ready system. There is a fledgling demo online, and we're still in the data collection stage. I say we, it's actually people working at Trinity College Dublin, and it's a very important project. And also, 10 years ago, there was text-to-speech system, but since then it's been expanded to different dialects and is integrated into call systems and accessibility aids. There's a new corpus, a national corpus under development, and it actually has language technology in mind for a change. All previous corpora were mostly geared towards the development of dictionaries and terminology, so this is very promising. And the Gaeltech project, which I've managed for the last several years, has looked at natural language processing tools and resources, including a bonus of the new Irish BERT model. Now, moving on to gaps and shortcomings, of which there are many. I'm going to focus on some here. We still have no digital plan for Irish. That's no digital plan for Irish. Ireland's AI strategy, so this is for the country of Ireland, is focused on English language technology, if you care to read the report. And there's a token reference to the need for collecting resources for the Irish language to ensure that public services are broadened to include a wider population. Okay, we still have no, as I said, reliable system for ASR, automatic subtitling, therefore, question answering system, named entity recognition. You can see it all on the screen here. These are subdisciplines that have been in the area of NLP and speech technology for years, and nobody has started any groundwork on this due to lack of investment and forward thinking. On top of that, we have a major skills gap because of the lack of forward thinking. We have 1 undergraduate course in Ireland. It's taught through English, and a few students come out every year speaking Irish. Now, they like to say also, because we have large tech companies in Ireland, they're often swept up straight away once they graduate. We have lack of dedicated funding for Irish language technology research. We also have minimal support or investment from industry, despite global tech companies being situated in Ireland as their EMEA headquarters. Okay, so the recommendations we made for the SRIA is we need a change of focus away from the current focus on dictionary development and training translators, because that is not the only step towards the future of the language. There's a lot of untapped potential, so that's a lack of awareness around the value of language data, which we have found during our work with the ELRC and dealing with public administration. We've also seen poor language data management practices due to the lack of awareness of the value of the data. We clearly need the dedicated language technology programs in whatever way possible at this stage. We need this long-term strategy. The National Digital Plan was begun in 2015. It's written, it just hasn't been published. Open source culture, we need to make sure where possible that corpora are available. Many of the corpora that are out there for Irish are actually inaccessible due to licensing restrictions. And of course, we would hope that some pressure is put on the large tech companies in Ireland to give back to the public through corporate social responsibility. Gur míle maith.
Thank you, Teresa. And Frida Stiers about the Dutch language from the Dutch Language Institute.
Goedemorgen allemaal. Welkom in Brussel, een tweetalige stad waar het Nederlands ook belangrijk is. So this was in Dutch, and welcome to all of you, and I'm very happy that we can, as a Dutch Language Institute, we played our part in this ILI reporting, and I would like to give you the state of affairs at the moment for Dutch language. So in European infrastructures, sorry, one slide, yeah, here we are. Dutch is a language of middle size in Europe. We have 25 million speakers in the Low Countries, that is Belgium, Flanders, and the Netherlands. It's also a native language in other parts of the world, Suriname, Caribbean, and we have minorities in different parts of the world. In both Flanders and the Netherlands, we are living in a very multilingual society, and so language skills are extremely important and highly valued. That also entails that language technology is strongly supported by, in other means, by computer-assisted language learning, educational games. Everything is subtitled on television, and there is a lot of support for search and text categorization. We can also see that the Low Countries are a strong economic region, and this entails strong activity on the internet, websites, internet use, everything is available in Dutch, and e-commerce is also very well developed in our language. At the same time, we see all the new trends. We are very active on Twitter, social platforms, new linguistic trends, language variations, subcultures, and the language of the youth. Now, as for language technology, in most of the European infrastructures, Dutch is included as a major language. So we can refer to the European Language Grid, Clarin, ELRC, and so on. And at my own Dutch Language Institute, we have installed a Clarin Knowledge Center for Dutch. Large numbers of corpora are available online, and at the Institute we are developing a computational lexicon for the Dutch already from the 6th century up to now, so both the historical and the contemporary data. Lots of tools are available for linguistic text analysis, parsing, text-to-speech processing, and this for both language varieties, the Belgian Dutch and the Dutch spoken in the Netherlands. And Dutch is present in most commercial online translation services. We are also an active partner in e-translation, and this is indeed very important for the future. There are projects and initiatives looking ahead to the future, but there is no overreaching research program. In fact, a lot of the activities are scattered at the moment. We have the Dutch AI Coalition for the Netherlands, with a subgroup specifically AI for the Dutch language. There is a Dutch Speech Coalition. There is NOTAS, a group of mainly companies working in language and speech technology in the Netherlands. And there is the Flanders AI program with a research track in NLP. We are both active in the Netherlands and Belgium in the Clarin network, and Daria and Clarin joined forces. We have a Claria research program on digital humanities and language resources, both in the Netherlands and Flanders. At our institute, a lot of material is available at our website Taalmaterialen, so language materials, and also the Radboud University in Nijmegen has a very strong overview of language services. We cannot be extremely positive. Although Dutch is not in bad shape digitally, public corpora, obviously, as you all know, become quickly outdated. And we saw slides before the coffee break about the MetaNet forum and the results that were produced in 2011. I have a feeling that we were stronger at that point, because just before 2011, we had a very huge research program that encompassed both Flanders and the Netherlands. It was called the Steven Research Program, where the national science organizations from Flanders and the Netherlands joined forces. And this stimulated strategic research in those days for language and speech technology. However, after 2010, the program ended, and there is no further possibility for cooperation between the researchers from both countries, unless we are speaking on European terms. Of course, we can cooperate in Horizon programs and so on, but not directly in between Flanders and the Netherlands. So we can say that, unfortunately, a great number of important resources and tools is still lacking or needs updating. And then again, there are recently emerging domains such as the language of social media, recent language in written, spoken form, materials of blogs. All this has to be worked on. So for us, although we are not in bad shape, the future is uncertain, and we call upon our national governments to install again a new research program for joint and cooperative research between the Netherlands and Flanders. Thank you.
Thank you, Frida. And Svetla, would you like to share your findings about the Bulgarian language? Svetla Koeva.
Здравейте всички! Много се радвам, че съм тук. Имам възможност да споделя накратко с вас каква е ситуацията с езиковите ресурси в България през 2022 година. Actually, some of the people from the audience probably understood what I did say. People from Croatia, if there are somebody from Slovenia, from Serbia, but most of you probably did not understand my words. And one of the reasons for this is that actually there is no real-time machine translation from Bulgarian to different languages, and also we do not have speech-to-speech machine translation, or at least speech recognition in real time. What are the main problems? The main problems actually is data, are data. There are some monolingual and multilingual resources for Bulgarian, and some of the corpora are even sentence-aligned. Also, there are some speech corpora, but most of them are collected and developed for specific purposes, and usually those purposes are research purposes. There are some positive facts, of course. There were several CEF-funded projects devoted to a collection of data sets for several European languages, Bulgarian among them. And also we have speech-to-text and text-to-speech applications designed specially for Bulgarian, only text-to-speech, specially designed for Bulgarian. Another positive fact is that the research in the field of information instruction is advanced. For example, in such domains as event captioning, event detection, fake news detection, sentiment analysis, and so on. If I could briefly summarize the strengths, there are a few strengths considering language technologies for Bulgarian in 2022. For example, there are some frameworks for text analysis which are available. There are also some models for Bulgarian, and their number is growing. There is relatively good ICT education at school, and also there are few companies which are quite successful in the field. However, the weaknesses still prevail. There are some technologies which are not developed for Bulgarian, for example, human-computer interaction. We cannot speak that there is technologies for language generation, language understanding, and if there are some technologies, for example, for text summarization or question answering, we cannot speak about real-time running applications. And the summary at the end, we are researchers. What we can do the best? We can analyze, we can invent, we can collect data, we can process data, also we can produce innovations and so on. But On the other hand, to be successful in our work, we need a lot of support. We need resources. In broad sense, what kind of resources do we need? At first place, again, we need data. We need to be able to collect data, to share data, to reuse data, and for this purpose, we need such repositories as ELDA, ELG, and language data space or spaces. We also need infrastructures, and we need computing power. But probably the most important thing are human resources. So we need education, focused education, and focused training in language technologies and artificial intelligence. And I'm going to conclude and to say that the vision of the researchers is that language technologies for all European languages have to be supported in order we to have political, social, and economic unity, and in order we to keep our cultural diversity. Благодаря ви много за вниманието, беше удоволствие.
So those were 3 official EU languages. Now we will move with the regional language, which is not an EU official one. And Gareth, would you share your findings about Welsh?
Bore da, a chroeso I drafodaeth am adroddiad yr ELA ar gyfer y Gymraeg. To begin, the publication of the Welsh Government's Welsh Language Technology Action Plan in 2018, in conjunction with its Cymraeg 2050 strategy for 1 million Welsh speakers by the year 2050, is a major highlight of the last few years. After years of small-scale and fragmented initiatives, the plan provides a coherent and planned way forward for the development of Welsh LT. A major new project began at Bangor University's Language Technologies Unit in 2020. It was designed to address the main points of the action plan and is annually funded by the Welsh Government. We have collaborated with Mozilla on speech data gathering using their Common Voice speech gathering platform. And this actually led to Welsh being one of the first 3 languages worked on after English, along with German and French. In respect of text-to-speech, we have published new Welsh synthetic voices under open licenses, and the Lleisiwr project, run in conjunction with the NHS, the National Health Service, builds personalised, bilingual synthetic voices for patients who are about to lose their voices for whatever reason. That particular project underlined the fact that developing bilingual models to aid minoritised languages where users constantly have to switch between their own language and the majority language is a key area, and one which we will be further researching and developing going forward. We have a Welsh language transcriber called Trawsgrifiwr, and that enables automatic video subtitling for Welsh. And Maxen, the Welsh language personal assistant, currently supports many skills such as a timer or searching for Welsh artists on Spotify, and that's undergoing development constantly. A Welsh part of speech tagging model has been developed for Spacey, unlocking the potential to perform many other NLP tasks on Welsh texts using Spacey, and Welsh has NLP tools for text analysis, anonymisation and a dependency parser. MT is offered by some major companies such as Google and Microsoft. Moses and Apertium are both available for Welsh, and newer neural net frameworks are being used. And indeed, they have been used to publish the first domain-specific MT engine for health. Of particular note is the Open Translation Memories website, where Welsh English translation memories can be shared. And a new Masters in Language Technology was launched in Bangor University in 2020, which helps to increase capacity in LT expertise. In respect of improvements, we have a need for sustainability, that is to say long-term funding for research and development for fragile minoritized languages. We need access to cross-border projects to provide opportunities for minoritized languages to catch up with the major languages. This point is especially important for languages such as Welsh, Scottish Gaelic and Cornish, the ones that are affected by Brexit. We need to develop expertise, so additional attention is needed for education and training in LT. And we need to tie in linguistic revitalization to the agenda of economic regeneration in peripheral regions where minoritized language communities are often found. On to the recommendations for the SRIA. Funding is needed to help minoritized languages to level up, as it were. Exchange programs could be developed to share knowledge, again, with a view to level up minoritized languages. As I alluded to before, it's important that minoritized languages are offered the same chances as those previously reserved for the official EU languages. And finally, data is king, so developing methods for dealing with intellectual property to help us facilitate collection of open data is incredibly important. It would also be useful to have clarification in respect of how data can be reused currently in respect maybe of model creation, that kind of thing. Diolch yn fawr.
And we have saved for last a country that I mentioned earlier as a best practice example when it comes to national support for language technology. And I'm sure you have all followed recently the president of the news about the president of Iceland talking to the big GAFAM players in the USA and trying to convince them to support Icelandic. So, Eirikur, could you share with us this experience and what are the results out of this?
Góðan dag. Það mjög ánægjulegt að fá tækifæri til þess að segja hér aðeins frá stöðunni í íslenskri máltækni. Thank you for this opportunity to say a few words about the situation in Icelandic language technology. From 2012, where the MetaNet reports were written, until 2019, very little happened in Icelandic language technology. There was no funding and no long-term projects going on. But in 2019, I talked here at Meta Forum about the language technology program for Icelandic that was just starting then and will be finished later this year. So many things have happened in the past 3 years or so. Iceland has become a member of Clarin, and we have established a Clarin Center where all the deliverables of the language technology program are available under standard open licenses. The government has published an AI strategy document where the importance of developing language technology resources and tools for Icelandic is explicitly mentioned. We have formed a strong language technology consortium comprising academic institutions, NGOs, and private companies. And the members of the consortium have cooperated closely on developing language technology resources and tools. And we also, language technology education and research has also been strengthened considerably, and the number of researchers and students and developers working on language technology has multiplied. So within the language technology program, we have developed a number of new resources, such as the Icelandic gigabyte corpus, general corpus of 1.9 billion tokens, PARICE, an aligned parallel corpus between Icelandic and English, Samromer, which is an audio corpus comprising 2.85 million sentences from 28,000 speakers. We've also developed a number of new tools, such as Greinir, which is a package that parses text and generates constituency trees and finds lemmas, inflects, noun phrases, assigns part-of-speech tags, and more. And Greinir Translate, which is a translation model based on a multilingual BART model. And a number of tools are under development and will be finished by the end of the language technology program later this year, such as a new text-to-speech system, a new speech recognition system, a new machine translation system between Icelandic and English, and more. But the language technology program will end later this year, and the future is uncertain. The government has indicated that the program will be prolonged, but no firm promises have been made, and future funding is not secured. And even though we managed to develop a number of important resources and tools, a great number of resources and tools, basic resources and tools are still lacking, such as spoken language corpora, parallel corpora between Icelandic and other languages than English, corpora for different purposes, and so on. We also need tools for sentiment analysis, summarization, question answering, natural language understanding, and more. Don't need to read this, you can see this on the slide. And we also need more cooperation between academia and industry, and more investment from industry. So, recommendations. We think our experience has shown that small languages at least need special dedicated language technology programs. And there's need for special support for low resource languages where the market is small and not sustainable. And for instance, Sabina mentioned yesterday that Greenlandic had problems with Microsoft. They have developed a spell checker for Greenlandic, but it doesn't work with Microsoft products. And we've had the same problems, for instance, with Apple. We have, for some years, had a reasonably good text-to-speech system, but it doesn't work with Apple products because Apple doesn't allow that. And we sent a delegation to the US last month, delegation of technicians headed by the President of Iceland and the Minister of Culture. And the delegation visited 5 major international IT companies. I think it was Amazon and Apple and OpenAI, Meta and Microsoft. And they were trying to persuade them to accommodate Icelandic and other small languages to their projects, or allow their project to work with these small languages. And they presented what we had been doing in the language technology program, which resources and tools we had developed, and said to them, you can have all these resources and tools for free if you either include them in your products or allow us to develop something that works with your products. And well, they were very well received by these companies, but it remains to be seen what comes out of this. But we hope that it will lead to something not only for Icelandic, but also for other small languages. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we are all open to questions. If there is any question from the audience? No? Then I may have a question, given the opportunity by Eirikur, who talked about the big players, the big industrial players. So do you think that the industry should be socially responsible, except for, of course, taking care of their own profits? Why should the industry cater for our small languages? This is a question to all of you, but Eirikur, please. No.
Yeah, well, we thought it was worth a try to send the head of state to these companies and tell them how important our language is for us, and hope that they would see that they benefit from this. They get good publicity from assisting a small nation to keep its language. Well, I was not a member of this delegation, so I don't know exactly how they were received, but I'm told that they were well received, and we, as I said, I think of course the market is very small, and this is not, they will not get money out of this, but perhaps good publicity.
Yeah, and Teresa, in the Irish language report, you have introduced, I think, the notion of corporate social responsibility when it comes to small language support.
Yeah, in the Irish report, definitely, we have made it as a recommendation. I can understand that from the profit margin point of view, you can't cover all 6,000 plus languages, so I understand this. And it's difficult then to pick and choose between languages and which one do you prioritize and otherwise. But I don't believe it should be a case of we can't help any of you. And I believe definitely in Ireland, where, as I mentioned, a lot of these global tech companies have their EMEA headquarters and they're enjoying the hospitality of Irish people and the Irish tax system, the low corporate tax. I do believe that out of social corporate responsibility, it's a minimal request that we have this return to the public. And I give you an example of Google. Google has Google Gmail, we have Google Drive translated into Irish, localized into Irish. That was done by a group of volunteers. Would you imagine how much money Google has and what they're paying their employees around Dublin? And they had volunteer translators for the Irish version of Gmail. So this is what we're up against, and I do believe it's a small token for some of these global tech companies to assign a small team. Okay, let's pick a language every 6 months just for I don't know, they get like 10 hours a month or something to do their own project. Maybe that's an idea, but I don't believe that it should be a case of, well, we can't help any just because it's not part of our profit margin.
Thank you. Lately, when we were trying to finalize the language reports, which were all submitted at the end of February, we had long discussions within the consortium whether we should continue using the very successful term of digital language extinction that was used and gained publicity back in 2012. So do you think this is still a relevant term? Are our languages digitally endangered? And in what sense when it comes to your languages, Frida or Svetla or Gareth?
Yes, I believe the term is still very relevant. I've published about this also for smaller languages. And indeed, if a language is not supported properly in the digital infrastructure, it might die, or indeed you might shift to using another major language because you simply can't find results, or you're not satisfied with what you can find. I would like to come back to what has been said here about these major players, the big five or the big companies, the big tech. Companies only think in terms of money and economic return on investment, but a lot of mistakes have been made when, for companies then and for commercial activities, if products cannot be localized properly to individual local markets. And localization entails translation, but adapting to local culture. So if the tools are not available to localize into a particular market, customers simply won't buy. And this has been established very often. We have loads of ridiculous mistakes being made by companies who don't know how to localize into local and regional languages. And so this, for Icelandic, they really made a very good case about this. So I think companies have to listen to the requirements of the different markets and try to make all language products available in these languages, because it helps other companies to then localize and sell their products into these regional markets.
Right. Yeah. So the industry is one part of an option in this discussion. I suppose the public sector is the other one. What is its role? Is the public sector a driver for demand, Svetla, for Bulgaria and Bulgarian?
Actually, the public sector was involved in the activity of collecting data during DRC project, and it still continues. The term is from the Irish partner. There is untapped potential there, and many people from the public sector actually contributed a lot with their resources. There are still problems there. For example, although there is a progress in the activities to collect translation memory, actually there is problem in such case that many public administrations actually do not collect their translation memory, they do not combine translation memory, and so on. So any new translation is actually from scratch. So there is a progress, but also there is untapped potential, as Teresa said.
So the public sector, I guess, could act as something like facilitator for exploiting the value of public data, right? But is it also, Gareth, the public sector the one that should procure language technologies for Welsh, if nobody else does?
Absolutely. The thing is, in Wales, we have official status with the English language, along with the English language, and we had that since 2011, when the Welsh language measure came into force. What that states is that the Welsh language should not be treated less favourably than the English language, and actually vice versa as well. So what that means basically is that everything that is public facing in the public sector has to be bilingual. Again, that there's issues then obviously in respect of translation. We have to do an awful lot of translation. So in respect of helping people to be more effective as translators, in respect of using MT, translation memories, and sharing of translation memories, that's incredibly important. And as I mentioned in my in my presentation, we created a translation memory repository based on the ELRI project. We copied the way they did things, that allows people to share their translation memories, which is wonderful. But yeah, our situation is positive because of the Act and because of how the Act affects the public services, the public sector.
Okay, thank you. We're already 5 or 4 minutes in the lunch break, so thank you all very much. Thank you for your patience. Ah, okay. Yes.
Yeah. So there were a couple of comments in the chat here from the online participants. And one note regarding was that we in Europe are very overly reliant on the large MNCs keeping their translation systems freely available. What if they don't? E-translation is a step in the right direction, but we are not prepared for that scenario.
Would anyone like to take this? I guess the question is about big translation agencies, if I understood correctly, not giving back their translations when they are procured by the public sector, right?
I think what I understood was that if we're relying on these US companies to provide machine translation and they suddenly withdraw these services for our languages,
Okay.
where we left. And it's a good question, and I'll invite you to the panel session later where we might discuss this. But it's a very good point. The idea is, of course, we need to be self-sufficient here in Europe and not rely on these US companies and not continue to try and wave our hands and be heard to start taking steps forward to look after our own technology.
Yeah. The notion of sovereignty has also been heard yesterday repeatedly. Yes, Frida.
I would like to add to that, that I can see that there are many workshops these days and publications about the fact that we should look at machine translation that is being offered today in a more critical and detailed way, like what is it really offering? Is it reliable or not? And e-translation is really a very strong element coming and being more visible these days and becoming stronger and stronger. For example, next week we have a workshop in Leiden in the Netherlands. Is there a place for Google Translate in higher education? Where we're going to challenge also students and teachers and professors to show the differences between these huge systems and where you can rely on and what you can't do. So I think there is gradually coming a more critical approach to all these different tools.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.